Well, Martin Feldstein, Harvard professor and former chief economic advisor to President Reagan, is now with us from Copenhagen. Martin, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning. Happy to be with you.
Martin, do you get a sense from where you're standing and from where you normally reside in the US that European leaders ahead of their key summit at the end of this month might be finally grasping the seriousness of the situation and are ready to unveil measures that placate investors, placate bond investors particularly across Europe?
I think there's an understanding that the problem is serious, but I don't get any sense of a long-term strategy for dealing with the problem countries. And of course the countries differ a lot. Greece is in terrible shape. I don't think it can be fixed. Italy is in pretty good shape, and I think they're on the right path. So it's a question of tailoring the remedies to the individual circumstances.
And Martin, what would you then like to hear? I mean, put simply in a short discussion between us, what sort of remedies would do you think would placate investors and give investors some sort of reassurance that they've got a grip on the situation?
Well, again, I think in the case of Greece, there is no solution. Unless Germany and others are prepared to finance them indefinitely, I think Greece really has to leave the Eurozone. Italy, on the other hand, I think under Mario Monti did the right things to slow the future growth of pensions, to increase taxes in a relatively painless way, so that they're on a path toward lower debt to GDP ratios, which should make bond investors feel comfortable. Spain is the big question, and while there's talk now about temporary bailout for Spanish banks, the bigger problem is the regional authorities in Spain. And there the Spanish government is going to have to work a deal in which those authorities no longer have the right to create fiscal deficits.
Is it only a matter of weeks, Martin, before Spain asks for a bailout from European authorities?
Or decides that they don't want to do that and that they would be better served by leaving the euro?
This is Spain we're talking about here.
We're talking about Spain.
Really?
Yes.
But Spain surely won't leave the euro. So as you say, it seems as if they're going to have to ask for a bailout. On the matter of Greece, I mean, you said Greece can't be saved. That leads me to believe, Martin, that Europe has to prepare for Greece's exit. This is something that's unquantifiable, many are saying.
Well, I think it would create problems. It would create chaos in the short run. I think in the longer run, it would be better for Greece to be able to adopt a new currency, a drachma, allow the currency to fall as currencies did in East Asia and in Latin America. That would give a significant boost to growth in Greece as Greeks shift their spending to domestically produced goods and services.
But it sounds simple, Martin, but I mean, Greece GDP would plunge. What about bank runs? What about the
Greek GDP has been plunging year after year after year. After a temporary fall in the real value of incomes, what would happen in Greece would be what happened in Korea, in Thailand, in Argentina, and elsewhere. After a couple of years, there'd be a shift in demand to domestic goods and services, which would create jobs and start boosting activity in Greece.
In short, Martin, before we speak to you again in the next section, should the ECB now be doing more? It decided to do nothing yesterday. Should it be doing more to help the Eurozone economy?
No, I think what Mario Draghi did and said yesterday was right on. I think it would be a mistake for them to try to do things that are really inappropriate for a central bank.
Janet Yellen leaving the door open to more policy accommodation from the Fed. Is it, Martin, just a matter of time before we see more QE of whatever nature from the Federal Reserve?
Well, there is a split in the Federal Reserve. Some think that they've done more than enough. Others, like Janet, think that it would be good to have an extension or an expansion of the Operation Twist. My sense is that they've been able in the last few years by doing that to help the bond market, to help the stock market, but not to do anything for economic activity. Housing is still depressed, business investment is depressed, so it's good news for stock market investors, but it really isn't good news for employment and growth.
But isn't being seen to be doing something, Martin, even if it is just for stock and bond investors, better than being seen to be doing nothing at all?
Well, but it has a cost in the sense that it adds to the amount of liquidity in the system that someday is going to have to be reversed. And that's going to be more difficult the more of it that there is out there. And so that's the reason why several of the voting members of the Open Market Committee of the Federal Reserve are worried that it could in the future be inflationary.
Ultimately, Martin, though, it'll depend on whether or not the US economy deteriorates or not. What's your assessment of US growth right now? It's trundling along at around 2%. Do you see further deterioration in the US economy, enough to warrant more quantitative easing?
Well, that's a two-sided question. I think the economy is likely to get weaker. I think we saw growth in the first quarter at 1.9%, but that was with employment rising at almost 250,000 jobs a month. Since then, in April and May, the employment gains have been about 75,000 a month. So I think it's going to be hard to maintain even that roughly 2% growth. But having said that, the economy is underperforming substantially, doesn't make me think that an easing of monetary policy would help. For the reasons that I said, I think there isn't any traction from bringing down already very low long-term interest rates.
On the matter of the employment situation, Martin, as you said, the labour market has stalled. The outlook for the labour market, if you look at the last 2 years, it's sort of following the same path. Do you see a slow, long, drawn-out improvement in the labour market? I mean, we're talking years and years here, or is there a chance that unemployment could come down in a quicker fashion?
I think it'll be slow because about half of all of the unemployed have been out for 6 months or longer. You know, in the U.S. economy, the typical median duration of unemployment is only about 10 weeks. So 6 months is very unusual, and I think that means that it's going to be a much longer process of bringing the unemployment rate down and bringing those people back into the labor force.
Got to ask you about this impending fiscal cliff, Martin, when, of course, there's going to be fiscal tightening possibly at the end of the year. What's your take on the various scenarios here? Are you looking upon this and expecting the worst, or can Congress, can they get their act together and ensure that history doesn't repeat itself, a repeat of last summer's debacle?
Well, I certainly hope that this fiscal cliff, this automatic increase in all kinds of taxes, corporate taxes, personal taxes, payroll taxes, as well as spending cuts that will automatically happen at the beginning of 2013. I hope that that can be avoided, that the Congress, after the election, will reach an agreement to postpone that while they work on serious reform. But if that doesn't happen, it really pushes the American economy in 2013 into a serious downturn. And that hangs as a cloud over the economy now.
What's the biggest cloud, Martin, right now for the US economy? Is it the Eurozone debt crisis? Is that in itself enough to drag it into recession, or can it withstand a worsening of the situation in Europe?
Oh, I think the U.S. economy could withstand a worsening of the situation in Europe. I think it slows us down, but it doesn't by itself push us into a further recession. But you look at the lack of momentum, the fact that household incomes have been falling, that real earnings have been falling, that debt continues to be extremely high. Put all of that together, and it's not surprising that consumer confidence is very weak, real retail sales per capita is falling. So that's the basic reason why the U.S. economy is greatly underperforming.
Martin, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for sticking around. Martin Feldstein there, Harvard Professor of Economics and President Emeritus of the National Bureau of Economic Research. Martin Feldstein there.